All right, so wrapping up the afternoon, we have a presentation on WisLoan and Telework. So I'd like to introduce Kathy Meisner and Maria Isberner. Is that right? Okay, very new. I'll let Kathy kind of explain their roles with Independence First. But as long as we were talking about transportation, and this is a hot topic with funding and the access features, we thought it'd be a great pairing to invite her along. So, and then we'll give you, do you want the handheld?
I'll just do the handheld. Okay. Hi, everyone. I know it's late in the afternoon, but this will be an exciting presentation. Try. I'm Kathy Meisner. I'm the Director of Independent Living Services at Independence First. And Independence First administers the WisLoan program and the Telework program. These are both alternative financing programs, so loan programs for people with disabilities. And the WisLoan program definitely can be helpful to people when they're purchasing vehicles. So that's why Laura asked me to come and talk to everyone.
My name is Maria Isberner. I am fairly new to Independence First. I am the WisLoan and Telework Coordinator.
All right, just to give a little bit of background, because I know some people in here are familiar with WisLoan and Telework, but there have been a lot of changes in the past couple of months. So just kind of revamping the program, changing things up, trying to make it easier. Easier for the Independent Living Center staff to submit applications, easier for consumers to fill out applications. So that's kind of our goal right now. WisLoan is, as I said, it's a statewide alternative financing program. There's a number of these throughout the country. In Wisconsin, WisLoan was started in 2001, and it was started by Independence First, and then also DHS, Department of Human Services, was involved as well. And so we received a grant for the WisLoan program. And what it is, it's a loan program for Wisconsin residents with disabilities to be able to purchase assistive technology. And as I said, there's a number of partners involved in the program. The state entity involved is Department of Human Services. Independence First administers the program. Then we subcontract with all of the other 7 independent living centers in Wisconsin to administer the programs. We have a committee that I'll talk a little bit more about, who they're the people that actually review the applications and determine if a loan is approved or not. And then the bank that we work through is BMO Harris Bank. When we first started the program, we were with M&I, but then when M&I was bought out, we got switched over to BMO Harris. All right, for someone to be eligible for the WisLoan program, the person has to have a disability, or the assistive technology needs to be for a person with a disability. So sometimes we will have like a parent applying for some type of assistive technology for a child. They need to be a resident of Wisconsin. If it's the individual taking out the loan, they need to be at least 18 years old. And the loan has to be for assistive technology or assistive technology services. So these are just some of the examples of what we typically see for assistive technology. Hearing aids and vehicles are probably the two biggest things that we do loans for. The reason for that is with hearing aids, you know, they're roughly maybe about $6,000 or more. And if someone walked into a bank and tried to get a loan for hearing aids for $6,000, it's not an item that the bank can secure, so they can't put any collateral on it. So a bank is not going to approve a loan for someone for $6,000 without any security on it. So perfect example of how this program can benefit people, and also if someone doesn't have the best credit as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we see a lot of loans for hearing aids, and like I said, vehicles is the other one. Lot of applications and loans for vehicles. The vehicle needs to have modifications in the value of at least $750. But the way that this works typically is we will have someone apply for a vehicle, and then they're also working with Family Care, IRIS, DVR, and they agreed to pay for the modifications. So we work together with that, so then the individual takes out the loan to purchase the vehicle and then works with their other funding source to provide the modifications. So that's probably one of the most common things that we do. And if anyone has any questions at any time, just interrupt. So these are just examples of assistive technology, but it also can be, back up for a second, it could also be AT services. And actually I just want to talk a little bit more about what is AT before I move on to telework. A lot of times people will be like, well, what's considered AT? And that's something that the WisLoan committee will determine as they're looking through applications. There is a federal definition that we follow, but they also are looking at, if the item, equipment, service is helping the person in some way. A perfect example, actually this was a loan that we just had, just recently. There was a gentleman who lived up north, and he had his part of his driveway done in cement. So, and he had a parking slab for his van. He used a wheelchair. So he was able to get to the house, to his van, and to the garage. But the rest of his driveway was not done in concrete, and it was dirt and rough and difficult. So he could not get to his mailbox. He could not put his garbage out. So he applied for a loan for the rest of his driveway to be done in concrete. And that was approved. And not typically something that you would think of as AT, but it's allowing him to be able to go and get his mail, take his garbage out. So like I said, not always like just the typical things that you think of. We have had people apply for fences if they have a child that wanders and they want to have them stay in the backyard and be able to play. So we've had fences approved. So, sometimes it's things, like I said, that you just typically don't really think about. The next program is Telework, and I'm just going to kind of briefly breeze over this because WisLoan is more pertinent to you guys. But Telework is another alternative loan program. It started a couple years later, much smaller, not as much money involved in Telework. Telework is a loan program to help people with disabilities to either become self-employed or work from their home. A lot of the criteria and the partners are the same. The big difference with Telework is that the state partner is DVR instead of DHS. But same process, same loan committee, same bank. Again, a lot of the eligibility is the same. Needs to be a Wisconsin resident, over 18. And the item needs to be for work, for them either to be self-employed or work from home. So this is one of the main differences between WisLoan and Telework. WisLoan is for assistive technology, must be related to the person's disability. Telework is for someone to purchase business type equipment, does not have to be related to their disability at all. One of the other things required with Telework, though, that can be a little bit of a drawback, is that our advisory committee does require that someone have a business plan if they're looking at starting their own business. And these are resources that we provide to the independent living centers that they can share with people. We have a checklist of what's needed in the business plan, so someone can just follow that. I've seen business plans that have been like professionally done, in a binder, but then also ones that have been like written by hand. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like as long as it covers all the questions. And just to kind of give you an idea, these are some examples of items that in the past have been purchased through Telework. So definitely office equipment, tools, equipment. Had a gentleman who had a decorative concrete stamping business. So all of his equipment to do that. Training to use equipment. And then the big difference is with vehicles, because Telework is related to business, does not have to be related to the disability. The vehicle does not need to be modified for telework. So we have had people purchase vehicles through telework. We had someone who was a mobile auto detailer. So he worked out of his van and went around and did auto detailing. We had another individual who did computer repairs in people's homes, so she kind of worked out of her van. One of my favorites was we had someone who purchased a mobile food and beverage wagon to do the auction circuit. So a lot of different things can be purchased through telework. Things that are not allowed are basically inventory, rent, salary. So inventory is something that you're going to be making money off of would not be allowable. And I kind of already touched on some of the examples of what we have had for telework in the state. Taxidermy, we have a mobile pet groomer. So it can be a variety of things. I'm going to actually hand it over to Maria for a minute.
So currently, the interest rate is 2.5% above prime rate, which right now I think is 5.25%. That is subject to change with prime rate. One thing that I like to explain to individuals that apply for the WisLoan program is that once they get approved and they move forward with closing on the loan, that rate is locked in. So their rate doesn't change when prime rate changes. Individuals can apply for loans as low or as little as $250 and all the way up to $50,000. So Independence First, we house loans that are under $2,500. And what that means essentially for the consumer is that they would close the loan with us and they'd make their monthly payments to us, and everything relating to that loan would be done through us. Anything over $2,500 is actually going to be through BMO, so the same thing where they'd close the loan with BMO, they'd work with a representative in their area to get that loan closed and then make all payments through BMO. Okay. So right now the loan terms and security for newly modified vehicles, a consumer can go anywhere out to 72 months. Modified vehicles under 5 years old, they can go out to up to 60 months. And then anything older than that, so anything 5 years or older, is going to be up to 48 months. So for things like computers, we're looking at the life expectancy of the equipment, so that the term is a little bit shorter. 24 months is the max term on that. And then for all other loans that'd be unsecured, so wheelchairs, scooters, hearing aids like Kathy was talking about, those we would go out to 48 months. Turning it over to Kathy.
I just wanted to briefly address home modifications because some of you may know that in the past through WisLoan people did use loans to pay for home modifications. Unfortunately, there was some changes in banking regulations, and those in the past, when we did that, when we did a home any loans for home modifications, they were done as a home equity loan. And so it wasn't a personal loan, it was a home equity loan, and there were some changes in the business regulation or banking regulations, and the loans that we can provide, we only can provide personal loans, so we cannot do home equity loans anymore. So unfortunately what that means is if someone needed to have a home modification done, it would not be something that we could secure, because now we can't put a lien on the home because it's not a home equity loan. So that means that it would be an unsecured loan. And unsecured loans can only go out 48 months. So as you all probably know, home modifications are usually quite costly. So, if you're looking at, getting it paid off in 48 months, you're going to have a really, really high monthly payment. So unfortunately, that is something that we're seeing a little bit more of. So when that happens, we're just really encouraging people, to go back to funding sources if they were denied or try to look for additional funding. Oh, question.
Thank you. Are there any stipulations for loans for manufactured homes?
No. Well, as far as like for like a ramp or something like that, or
Well, any kind of, like, I know their manufactured homes are controlled by HUD, I believe. So if any kind of modification is going to be, make the thing more, if it's going to be more expensive than what the manufactured home is worth, then sometimes they can't get a loan for things like that.
Well, the committee would look at that value, the loan to value ratio on any home.
Yeah.
But manufactured homes aren't necessarily HUD. I mean, anyone can do their own manufactured home on land that they own or something like that.
Maybe I'm thinking of financially. I'm not sure. I read something about
You might be thinking like a HUD financial
Yeah.
type situation, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as long as, the person can afford whatever it is within 48 months, and the person needs to own the home, or if they don't own the home, the AT has to be removable from the home, and they would have to get approval from the landlord. So.
Yes.
So for anything over the 25, no. Anything over the 2,500, you said goes to BMO, right?
Correct.
So, okay, say I just recently turned one in,
Mhm.
application. So how would I know, does Independence First usually send an email, I got everything that's needed because I'm not resting. I just want to be confident knowing that, hey, everything was turned in and because it was like maybe 4 days before the committee met.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know how that works.
And that's something I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the committee, but those are things that we're trying to work out and get back on track as far as like having better communication of when, an application comes in, hey, we got it. And when we say that anything over 2,500 goes to BMO Harris, we're still involved. That's just where the money's coming from. So anything below 2,500, BMO Harris doesn't want to use their money to lend. So we're actually using funds from Independence First to make those loans. And then our accounting department is getting the payments for those loans. So we still administer it, still work on it. It's just where the money's coming from. Yes.
So while this might not apply to some of like the the larger, more expensive home modifications, do you guys use other type of resources, like a Revitalize Milwaukee or something like that, where they're doing home modifications for no cost, depending on, the parties involved?
And actually, that's more of the role of you're like a plant, because I think that's my next slide, right? You are. All right. And that fits more into the role of the independent living staff. Because what we do is like I said, we contract with all of the independent living centers in Wisconsin. So this service is available, this loan program is available to everyone in the state. That's also why we use BMO Harris, because it's a statewide bank. So people can close in their areas. But, with the IL staff, they conduct outreach, they talk to people, they take the loan application, and they would be like working with the people, the person to find additional resources, things like that. And then once, they have the application, then it gets submitted to the WisLoan Telework Coordinator. So the WisLoan Telework Coordinator, because we're going to then be preparing the information to go before the committee, we try and, keep a very, neutral focus on it and not really provide as much suggestion. We're hoping that the IL staff do that. Does that answer your question? So the role of the WisLoan Telework Coordinator, which is now Maria, to kind of let you know like what happens is when an application comes in, what's going to happen is we're going to let the center staff know that we received the application. And then what happens is, we make sure that everything's complete, and then we pull the person's credit report. And we will look at the person's credit report. There might be some questions, so we may have to call the individual to ask some questions, get some clarification, and we'll talk a little bit about that and what the committee looks at in a minute. But then we prepare a summary for our advisory committee. So the summary has information about the person as far as their age, their disability, what it is that they're asking for, how much it costs, information about, their employment, their debt to income, all of that kind of fun stuff. But with the committee, they never know who the person is or even what area of the state the person's in. So, we sanitize the credit reports. There's no names on the applications. So just try and keep it, really confidential. As far as like the WisLoan committee, one of the things that we're changing is when the WisLoan program first started, there was an advisory committee that met every month, and they reviewed applications. There was a period of time that WisLoan went under the mobility store and was administered through the mobility store, and there were some changes made to the program. They really went to doing things more electronically. The committee voted on things by email, basically reading over summaries on email. And we kind of found that wasn't working when the program came back to the IL department at Independence First this past January. So what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to put it back to how it was and what worked. So we're going back to monthly in-person meetings, and there were a couple of people who were on the advisory committee in the beginning that I actually asked to come back, and they did. So just to kind of give you an idea of the individuals that are on the committee, we have a retired DVR supervisor, someone who used to work at an independent living center, a couple of people involved in banking and finance, but we're always looking for more people. So it's a work in progress, but we're going back to meeting monthly. They discuss the applications. They usually have a lot of different questions for us, and then they vote on if they approve it or not.
So some of the things, well, pretty much everything that the committee is looking at when they're reviewing the applications, it's pretty standard and typical of your traditional lending, the things that they're looking at. The difference is there's no cut and dry answer to like credit score. So they're looking at the credit history of the individual, and that's where that loan summary comes in, and the credit report, that sanitized credit report where I make sure that all the information that I received from the consumer is on there, telling the story if there's a negative credit history. They're looking at debt to income ratio, but again, there's no cut and dry percentage of what's that cutoff number. They're looking at the story. What happened, what's contributing to if it's a potentially high debt to income ratio. Discretionary income, so what does the consumer have left over once all their bills are paid and once all is said and done? Again, they're looking at that credit score, but there's no set score. It's not like at 500, you're denied. It's all about what happened, what contributed to that. History of bankruptcy, so if someone has a bankruptcy on their credit, it's not a deal breaker. Again, it's about what happened to cause that bankruptcy. Was it medical collections? Was it an issue with the benefits they're receiving monthly? Again, telling that story. And then, of course, pretty standard stable work and living arrangement, making sure that they're fully understanding the consumer's situation.
I just wanted, oh, actually, you're going to talk about it in the next slide about the medical. There you go.
So what does the committee look at as far as debt? They're looking at the things that you would look at, or I should say a bureau would look at when reporting to any of the credit bureaus. So the monthly housing payment, your mortgage, your rent, any loans that they have outstanding, so auto loans, installment loans, student loans, they're looking at those monthly balances or those monthly payments. And then they're looking at 4% of collection. So if somebody does have collection items out there, we're capturing the whole amount, but really that monthly debt is a portion of that 4%, which would essentially be a payment if they had a payment on that collection. And to Kathy's point, what they don't look at, which is great, is medical collections. If someone has medical collections on their credit report, that's not taken into consideration. It's not even looked at by the committee. And they're not looking at monthly insurance, premiums, phone bill, utilities. Again, it's thinking about all those things that would be reported to a credit bureau. So I'll let Kathy talk.
Not anymore. Not anymore. This was one of the changes that was made previously with the program. They were looking at all of these different things like insurance, phone bill, you name it, and the application was really, really long. So we changed that. We are no longer looking at those things because that is not what a traditional bank would look at. So we're not going to look at it. So anyone who's from an independent living center, all of the newest forms and applications are up on OwnCloud for you to use. But yeah, right now we're doing the same as, and that's how it was in the past too. So we're looking at the person's rent and their mortgage, and then any loans that they had, like Maria said, and then 4% of their collection. So, I mean, for some people, I mean, the interest rate is not great, but for someone who would not be able to get a loan through a traditional loan through a bank, this might be a really good option for them. Because as Maria said, the committee really kind of looks at the whole situation. They ask questions. They want to know, did you file bankruptcy? Why? Oh, someone's, your PCW stole your identity? All right, yeah, okay, which has happened. The other thing is what happens is if someone does not pay their loan, if their loan goes into default, so if they stop paying after 90 days, it goes into default, that loan actually transfers from from BMO Harris over to Independence First, and we need to pay off that loan with revolving funds from the WisLoan program. And depending on what it is, if it's a vehicle, a van, something like that, we will go after it and have it repoed. And sometimes people will start paying later. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to point out. We have a lot of people who are return visitors for the program that have had 3, 4 WisLoans before. And what people can actually do is there's been a number of people who maybe have a loan for a vehicle and they still have a balance on that loan, but they want to buy a different vehicle. We're not able to refinance, but in that situation like that, we would be able to roll what they owe into the new loan and to work with them that way. We've also had some people who have defaulted, have stopped paying, then they realize they need another loan. So in those situations, we tell them, as long as you pay off your balance of your previous loan, you can reapply. And that happens a lot. We actually have someone that just did that. And the committee does not hold that against them. So, all right. And then we just had Maria's contact information on the, oh.
So if you have someone who's in the process of paying a loan. Oh, okay. For the sake of the microphone. If you have someone who is currently in process of paying back loans, they fall in hard times, is there like forbearance, any kind of, what's the other word I'm looking for? Not forgiveness, deferment. Thank you.
Not necessarily. In the past, we used to have what were called courtesy loans. And if it was a Independence First loan, we could just tack that payment onto the end of their loan. We no longer have those. But if it is an Independence First loan, so if it's under the $2,500, or if it's someone who defaulted and we had to take it in-house, we have a little bit more leeway with those people. BMO Harris won't. I mean, they're strictly on their 90 days. But, when in, taking the application and everything, you do develop a rapport with people. And there, people will call and say, hey, this is happening. I actually had a woman a couple weeks ago, and it was automatic withdrawal, and she knew that she was not going to have enough money in there. So she called me, and she was like, if you guys you can't take it. There's nothing there. So I'm like, okay, how much can you afford? And she told me an amount. I'm like, okay. So then I just let our accounting department know that. And so, yeah, we do try and work with people as best as possible.
That's great. And then I'm assuming too that you report to the credit bureaus then, if there's that 90-day default.
BMO Harris does.
BMO Harris does.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
If they get denied, is there an appeal process?
Yes, if they get denied, there is an appeal process. Basically, the person just needs to present information that is different, that's adding to, adding to the reason that it was denied. And also, if someone, is denied, there's nothing saying that they can't come back later on and apply for, something else.
One thing to add to that too, to that point is what I try to do, and I believe what people did before me, was letting the individual know if they were denied, if you make so many payments, or if you fix this or fix that, come back in a couple of months. We definitely do that and let them know the things that if they adjusted, maybe they would get approved.
Yeah, if that is very true. If someone is denied, we try and give them some resources. We give them the contact information so they can get a copy of their credit report and look at it and then try and work on it and clean it up. Any other questions? All right. I'm done with 5 minutes to spare.